All right. Yes, I'm live. Praise the Lord. Thank you all for being here again. I'll start at 4 minutes. So when you come in, let me know in the live chat, please. Thank you very much. It is me, Ari Dossett, or for those who follow the channel, Rashid. I'm here with another live stream. This time, I'm going to briefly talk about the fatal error of the deceased Robert Johnson, who has been nicknamed the grandfather of rock and roll. Again, I started 4 minutes. So when you're here, let me know in the live chat, please. Thank you very much. I see 2 thumbs ups already. Thank you. Please, when you're here, hit the like button. And if you aren't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much. Again, I started 4 minutes. Please let yourself be known in the live chat when you're here. Thank you very much. Big Meek is here. Tracy's here. Thanks for being here, Tracy. Curly Girl is here. It's good. 5 thumbs up. Thank you very much. Danielle is here. Maria Garcia is here. Again, I'll start at 4 minutes. Dario, I'm glad you're here. Wait, Dario never heard of Robert Johnson? Oh, okay. We have some catching up to do briefly. I won't talk too much about Robert Johnson because it's not that relevant. But I want you to know who he was. He isn't called the grandfather of rock and roll for nothing. Because as you know, when I do my historical research, I go deep. I look at the context. And there are quite some disturbing things about Robert Johnson. I'm going to reveal over here. Joe, I'm glad you're here. Oh, Avert, I'm glad you're here. All right. If you're here, hit the like button. Thank you very much. Dying doesn't matter that you don't know much about rock and roll. I'll inform you. Fear not. Well, lad, I'm glad you're here. It seems that I started my live stream right on time. All of you are here. Praise the Lord. And by the way, this is going to be an audio live, so I'm not going to show anything on the screen nor on the whiteboard. And just to be sure, I closed on all the other apps on my computer, so there will not be any freezing screen or anything to hinder the live stream now. I also purchased a new mic because the other microphone had a Zoom sound in it. I don't know why that was, so I hope you can hear me better now. As you all know, this ministry is given to me by Heavenly Father, and nothing comes in the way of this ministry, absolutely nothing. So, all right. Thanks for the 8 thumbs up. Thank you very much. Please confirm to me if you can hear me clearly. Thank you. Suzanne, I'm glad you're here. Right on time. I'm about to begin at 4 minutes. And by the way, after this live stream, you can look up information about Robert Johnson yourself, but I'm going to go in depth about certain things that people don't really discuss about him. All right. Big Meek, if it sounds crisp with you, then renew your web browser, please. Okay. Now, Robert Johnson. All right. And as you know, I'm going to take the Wikipedia page with me because Wikipedia is a political correct platform. Okay, not everything Wikipedia is true. Some of it is distorted. But anyway, this is what they say. Robert Leroy Johnson, born May 8, 1911, and died August 16, 1938, was an American blues musician and songwriter. His landmark recordings in 1936 and 1937 display a combination of singing, guitar skills, and songwriting talent that influenced later generations of musicians. He's now recognized as a master of the blues, particularly the Delta blues style. All right, you can go on and on and on, talk all about this musical career. But You go further, and you can find documentaries about it because there's some documentaries made about Robert Johnson. Some historians, including white historians, want to find out who was this Robert Johnson. And look at this. Robert Johnson is one red flag about him that right off the bat shows you there's something off. They don't know when he was born. Yeah, but Rashid, on Wikipedia, yeah, I know what Wikipedia is stated. Wikipedia stated the conventional facts that people agree to. Conventional facts doesn't mean they're true facts. Truth being told, no, but body knows when he is born. Now you may say, but Rashid, during those days, the census was a bit difficult. Come on now. The 1910s, in which you already had the telephone, you already had, um, I would say, telegraphs and all of that. You already had video, videography, recorded audio, but the census wasn't well. Nah. So that's the first thing. It appears that Robert Johnson, during his youth, um, it was a bit traumatic. Okay. And remember, during this time in the United States, especially in the south of the United States, there was segregation. So whites had their society and blacks had their society. And remember, in 1865, the United States, after the end of the Civil War, removed slavery from public life. A Reconstruction era began, which was sabotaged later on. And public lynchings were common. So the grandparents of Robert Johnson were still slaves. Okay, so slavery was still fresh in the minds of the black population in the southern United States, and the trauma of slavery still afflicted the black population. Also, the economic oppression that succeeded the abolition of slavery still haunted it. Now, now you know a bit of the background of Robert Johnson. Now, I need to mention this, and also what I need to mention is that paganism was a booming thing in the black community of the United States, especially things as voodoo, which was quite popular. And you will understand why I mentioned this later in the live stream. So Robert Johnson, he grew up, he attended school, then he wanted to learn to play music. A musician called Isaiah Zimmerman, or Ike Zimmerman was also called. He later became a preacher later in his life. But Isaiah Zimmerman knew how to play guitar. He was a family man. And Robert Johnson lived with him and his family for over a year. And Isaiah Zimmerman, also a black man, taught them the guitar skills. And let me say it like this. When Robert Johnson played guitar, the crowd, the other black folks, because remember, whites and blacks lived segregated back then, people couldn't stand him playing the guitar. They would say it's a weird sound. His own people looked down on him because he couldn't play the guitar well. Now, the legend says he went away for 6 months and came back. And people didn't want to hear him play the guitar. Say, man, you're horrible. But he still forced people to hear him. So we thought, okay, let's let him play. Then he leaves us alone. And when he played, people were shocked with how good he could play the guitar. Now, later, Robert Johnson said to several people he sold his soul at the crossroads. Now, first thing first, crossroads are important in paganism. Why? Because it's an X. And the X is equivalent of 6 in Greek numerology. So XXX is 666, and the X is an abbreviation of Helios, another name of Apollo, Satan's Nephilim son, who's called the Antichrist in the New Testament. So the X refers to Apollo. That's why the X is so important in paganism. Whether you're a black pagan, Chinese pagan, white pagan, the X is relevant. And often pagans go to crossroads to do their community rituals. Yes, it happens also in the Netherlands. I won't go too much into detail, but there are people going to crossroads during the night, sometimes between 12 in the morning and 12 and 3 in the morning to do some weird rituals. The police seldom catch them because you even have pagans in the police forces, but that's another topic. So, Robert Johnson, growing up in a pagan community, yes, there were many believers amongst the blacks, but paganism was also high over there, with the trauma of slavery still being fresh. And he mentioning crossroads and hellhounds. A hellhound, hellhounds. Now let me say like this: during slavery, it was common to use violent dogs, traumatized dogs, to hunt the slaves. If a slave was too far away from plantation, dogs with sharp teeth were sent after him. So to him to use being chased by hellhounds or anything related to that in his songs, that's quite disturbing. Now you can listen to his songs yourself. Probably on Spotify you can find them. Some of his lyrics are quite disturbing, especially when you realize the context in which he grew up, with the trauma of slavery being so fresh still, and the people there still living under economic oppression. The thing with Robert Johnson is, to outsiders, he was described as a kind man with manners, but behind the scenes, he had this whiskey. I won't say addiction, but he was kind of drinking whiskey too often, and he was a womanizer. He was kind of with I won't say a sex addict because I can't diagnose him. He's long gone, but he had a weakness for black women and whiskey. Because remember, it was a segregated society. If he was seen near a white female, he could have been lynched. That's how serious it was back then. So Robert Johnson, he did collaborate with people from other ethnicities, of course, but he mostly stayed with in the black community in the United States. Now, the title of this live stream is The Fatal Error of Robert Johnson. Now, one error he made already is not following Christ. That's the main error he made. But that's too obvious. Don't have to mention that error. All right? By the way, there are also voodoo references in his lyrics, so you can check it out for yourself. He even mentions he even fakely mentions a ritual that was used by voodoo practitioners to chase unwanted people from the property. So Robert Johnson was informed and knowledgeable about about paganism and the paranormal. So he had no excuse not to serve Christ. So that's one thing. But there's another error he made. And that's the error I want to talk about more in this live stream. And this is an error I warned you about also in many of my videos and live streams before. Robert Johnson, before I continue, he died at age 27. At least we think he was 27. Some say he was 26, others say he was 27. Again, we don't know exactly when he was born. Oh, and here's another thing. We don't know how he died. Some say he was killed. He was beaten by the jealous husband of a woman he slept with. Others say that he was poisoned with whiskey. Others say that demons came and took him. We don't know how he died. And the thing is, the death certificate of Robert Johnson does even mention a cause of death. And for a long time, people had no idea how Robert Johnson even looked like. There are only 4 confirmed pictures that survived of him. So everything points out that people try to forget about this man, that this man even existed. I mean, think about it. You mean to tell me that back then, again, you had the segregated society in the United States. You had this black man playing this guitar so well, even inspired artists from other ethnicities. He was traveling around playing music. People loved his music. You can tell me that a man like that who went from place to place, even moved around several times, that he dies. There's no actual cause of death. And nobody talks about him, nobody writes about him. It took researchers a lot of effort to find out, to reconstruct his life. Oh, and later artists who are devil worshippers praised him. And many of those artists aren't even black. It's mostly white rock artists that praise Robert Johnson. Now, the error I'm talking about, some of you already noticed where I'm heading towards this. When Robert Johnson was younger and playing guitar and people were scolding him, he moved away from the people that were scolding him. He came back after 6 months and he proved his improvement. And that was his big error. That, as you can see, led to his early death. Now, why am I saying this? Just think about it. You have a group of people who invest in seeing you as the failed musician. Every musician needs to practice to be better. I don't care which instrument you begin to play, you have to practice to be better, as simple as that. I don't care if you have a natural gift to play a certain instrument, you still need to practice it. So his own people were not interested in investing in him. They were not okay nor cool with seeing one of their own prosper. So Robert Johnson left. Smart decision. Whether he sold his soul to the devil or not, I'm not going into that right now. What I'm putting out here is he came back to the same place that refused to believe in him. And he forced them to recognize he was better. And the people were shocked. They couldn't believe Robert Johnson could play so well. They were upset. And after that, he had his career. He had two recording sessions only. Things went up for him afterwards. Now, my question is, why did he go back to prove himself to those people? I mean, if you improved your guitar skills, what do those people have to do with it? They hindered you in improving your guitar skills because they didn't even give you tips or advice. They weren't even construct with you, just scolded you. So those people were not interested in seeing you improve at all, because having one of their own musicians improve would contribute to the community. They were not interested in seeing one of their own succeed. You go away, you come back, they still see you as the guy you were before, and you prove them wrong. What do you think is going to come to the minds of those people once you prove them wrong? And they were amazed. They couldn't. They were shocked. They will be upset with you. In their mind, you were the failure. As long as you remain the failure, they don't have to look at themselves. Because think about it. Robert Johnson improved. Robert Johnson improved. Now look at this. Robert Johnson made steps in life. Not only did he improve his musical skills, he was also a singer, and he took steps. Because remember, it was a segregated society in the United States back then. So as a black man to succeed anywhere in life, it was more difficult. You faced more resistance, but he did. But look at this. He took steps in life, and his steps put things in motion. One question. What did those other people from his hometown do in life to improve? What did they do? Oh, the fact alone I need to ask this question shows you they didn't do anything. So you have a bunch of people who see that they're descendants of slaves, that they're still being looked down upon in the United States of America. They're still being oppressed by all types of oppressive laws. And you have a young man amongst them who wants to improve and make it in life. Instead of encouraging this young man and say, you know what, you want to play guitar? You know what, we're gonna find a guitar player for you to help you. Okay, so you know what, you want to move on in life? We should do it too. Instead of being inspired by Robert Johnson, they lash out against him because they don't want to face the bad situation they were in. They just wanted to escape. And them lashing out at Robert Johnson was their escape. Now, when the people of that town were proven wrong, they were shut up. They couldn't complain about Robert Johnson anymore. But deep down inside, the proof that Robert Johnson showed to them caused them to have a mental breakdown. Because they would always compare themselves to Robert Johnson, say, well, at least uh, we're not a rejected guitar player like he is. They felt powerful looking down on Robert Johnson. But now Robert Johnson proved them wrong, their mental health collapsed. And they felt bad. And who are they going to blame for this? Robert Johnson. Now, if they would have heard later on Robert Johnson broke through, they would have still turned on Robert Johnson. You get me? But then everyone would be able to see, well, you guys are just envious and jealous bigots because you guys didn't do anything in life. But no, Robert Johnson shut them down himself. And he did, he was successful. But by doing that, he set in motion his own demise. And the thing is, Robert Johnson, after this confrontation, he also moved around. Robert Johnson couldn't live in just one place. He couldn't. He had never succeeded in living in one place for a long time. This also contributed to his marriage marriage falling apart. Now, why do you think he wasn't able to stay in one place for long? Because he knew people were after him. But here's the thing. He contributed to the situation. Robert Johnson should have never went back to prove himself to those people. He should have never done that. Because I'm telling you, those people were folks who didn't want to deal with anything in life. The fact they decided to scold Robert Johnson instead of encouraging him to be better shows you the type of negative and bitter mindset they had. And now they can't dump anymore on Robert Johnson. So what's going to happen now? They're going to turn on each other or they're going to lose their mind. As simple as that. So, Robert Johnson's fatal mistake was proving himself to those who were not worthy of the proof. Or as Jesus said, he cast pearls before swine. That's what Robert Johnson did. And I can tell you, he died quite young. Robert Johnson could have easily become 80, 90, or even 100 years old. He could have even extended his career. He could have done much more, but his life was cut short. And the fact that he died, and people don't even want to talk about how he died, shows you that it was an inside job. So it were not the racist white folks in the South, or the KKK, or any of those racist establishments that was a danger to Robert Johnson. It were his own people who didn't want to face reality. They were the number one enemies of Robert Johnson. Even today, and I'm saying this, even today when people give him recognition, it's mainly artists of European ancestry that credit him. It's quite sad that your own ethnic group rarely gives you credit. So, what can we learn from the life of Robert Johnson? Even though he was not a believer, unfortunately, he wasn't a believer, even though he likely made a deal with Satan in exchange to succeed. Or even if he didn't make a deal with Satan directly, he used paranormal aids to get ahead. So even though he was not a believer and he didn't live that long, we still need to not take advantage, we still need to use this opportunity to learn from how he lived and what an impact he had. His legacy is here. He influenced many musicians. He influenced the Western world. He influenced the Western culture, absolutely. So in the case of Robert Johnson, it wasn't racism that got him killed. It was his own people that did not look for solutions. I mean, Robert Johnson succeeding in music. Hey, that's good news. One of our own is succeeding. Hey, we have more musicians over here, guys. You guys go out there too and succeed also. No. Who does the people think like this? Who does Robert Johnson think he is? Now he suddenly plays guitar very well and he goes around having a good life, and we are left behind here suffering the miseries of racism and all of that. That's how people were thinking. A lot of those blacks in the South had a loser mentality, to be frank. And this loser mentality that they had, they projected this onto Robert Johnson. So in their mind, who's Robert Johnson? Being part of the losing group, thinking he has a right to win. Who told them he has any value? Who told him he's worth anything? That's the dumb thinking that those people had. And in the United States of America, you still have a lot of African Americans till this day with this dumb attitude. Their forefathers had this attitude after slavery, and many of them have it till this day. Simple as that. So, when you have a breakthrough in your life, do not share the good news to people who are not worthy of the good news. Those people, in the case of Robert Johnson, what did they do for themselves to break through in life? Where's their influence? Where's their legacy? Where's their impact? If Robert Johnson, Robert Johnson was not rich. He don't have that many connections. Yet, he managed to succeed in life. What does other people do? Oh, they just passed the decades and then they died. Look, some people don't even consider their own well-being. So they won't consider your well-being. So when you break through, expect there to be a backlash against you breaking through. So never prove yourself to those who are not worthy of the proof. And this is what I see happening with a lot of African Americans still this day. And not only African Americans, it happens to more people. But I'm using African Americans as an example now because it's obvious that it's going on with them. They think they have to prove themselves to people who didn't believe in them. And I need to correct that thinking. No, you don't. Those people, do they even believe in themselves? No. If they don't even believe in themselves, how do you think they're going to believe in you? They will not. Or apart from believing in themselves, do they serve the Heavenly Father? Oh, no. If they don't serve the Heavenly Father, then there's some deep-rooted dysfunction over there. So you need to watch out. So what it comes down to is that Robert Johnson was intelligent, absolutely. He was practical, but he lacked discernment. If Robert Johnson would have just sat down and examined the situation, he would have never gone back and showed his skills to the people. He would have never done it. And if Robert Johnson had more discernment, he would have realized that him drinking so much whiskey and chasing all those females would be used against him at some point. He was even warned by some other musicians about that. So Robert Johnson himself was fleeing. Yes, he was pagan, so he was a bit more practical than common worldlings, but he was still fleeing. So Robert Johnson, he had relief, but relief expired. Once relief expired, things came back on him. And in this case, he was not on time to renew the charm, and he died. As simple as that. So that was the fatal error of Robert Johnson. But apart from this error he made, ask yourself the following also. This man, according to historical research, he had two recording sessions in his whole life. Okay? So he only had two recording sessions, and his songs became popular. But the thing is, very quickly, less around a year after his second recording session, he died. And there were rumors that there were people upset with him, wanted to knock him, wanted to do things to him, and all that. So there were rumors about people being upset with him from the black community, not from the outside. And remember, I told you about worldlings, how worldlings often just flee when they know there's danger around you. Now, in the case of Robert Johnson, some people warned him and he took some measures, but again, he was not a believer. He had no real safety work for him. He only had relief from danger, no deliverance from danger. You mean to tell me that this young musician was in his mid-20s? You mean to tell me that he had all this success, traveling around, getting along with other musicians too, and he had all this anger against him, and none of the people were in on it? Look, I want to teach you the following. This is something separate from the topic of Robert Johnson. Anytime you find an individual in history that had an impact on the community, but when you want to research this individual, there's a lot of controversy around the individual. The controversy around the individual's record history is proof enough that there was a setup. As simple as that. Okay, but if someone is still alive, okay, because this is about people who pass away, but if someone is still alive, and you want to find out more about where the individual is from, but you keep encountering this wall when you want to research information about them, then that is also a red flag that there's some type of conflict going on. Robert Johnson, and if you can prove me wrong, you can prove me wrong. But based on what we can find about him, and when we put things in perspective, Robert Johnson was a conflicting figure. Robert Johnson was never meant to break through as a musician. He was never meant to break through and cross the racial boundaries of the United States back then. So him breaking through and going so far, it made a lot of people look bad. All the people who talk bad about Robert Johnson, they were all humiliated now. And when you have a crowd of people humiliated, they will become violent and they will become time bombs. Some will even go so far that they will do black magic on you, witchcraft on you. Some will give false police reports to get you arrested, or some will try to send hitmen after you, or they will try to set you up themselves by kidnapping you and killing you, or they'll seek to sabotage your career, or if you're married and you have children, they'll try to hurt your children just because they couldn't get to you. When a crowd of worldlings is humiliated, watch out. There's nothing in the world more dangerous than a humiliated crowd. When you have a crowd of people in the world and they are humiliated because their expectations they don't come true or their predictions failed, watch out with them. Because from that point on, this humiliation becomes dark tension that will leak out one way or the other. That's how simple it is. So, apart from this Robert Johnson individual, I have a question for you now. Do you know anyone alive now? It doesn't have to be someone famous, but do you know anyone alive now of which you suspect they are a conflicting figure? Let me know in the live chat. You don't have to say who it is or whatever, not necessary, but do you know anyone alive now? Maybe someone in your environment or someone in your community of which you suspect is a conflicting individual. There's one thing about conflicting individuals. Conflicting individuals always have this mysterious vibe around them. It is as if when you mention this individual's name, people get silent or people don't know what to do. So, this is one red flag I want you to be aware of. And this is a red flag that a lot of pagans use when they examine people. When you mention someone's name and people get silent or people get suddenly look annoyed or people begin to change the topic, there you know that's a conflicting individual. Or when you find out that someone has a lot of accomplishments, but you don't see anyone recognize this individual, that is a conflicting individual. What I mean by the conflicting individual is this individual triggers unease in the masses. They trigger unease in the public. And such people, there are three things society does with them. First, society tries to silence them by blackmailing or intimidating them. When that fails, society begins to effectively persecute them, trying to get them killed. When that fails, society will silence them. So, tries to hide them, I mean. So, first, they seek to silence you, then they seek to kill you, and if that fails, they will hide you. Sometimes, after they kill you, they'll seek to hide you from the historical records as much as possible by either ignoring you or by giving attention to others. And this is another red flag I'm teaching you over here. Sometimes, when society wants to hide you, they will put others in the spotlight. For example, there may be 5 boy bands out there who are popular right now. And those boy bands can't even sing well and they can't even play the instruments well. Yeah, there's 5 pagan boy bands out there in the media, on Spotify, on social media also, on radio. They're played on the radio. Everyone was talking about them. But then one day you find out that there's this band of young believers that make excellent music, better music than those 5 boy bands that you have out there. So these 5 youngsters who are believers are making excellent anointed music. But you never even heard of them because you only hear about those 5 boy bands out there. What is this? Society doesn't want you to figure out that these blessed youngsters even exist. They can't shut down those blessed youngsters because they walk by faith. So what do? They create 5 other bands and force them down people's throats so that people are overwhelmed by those 5 pagan bands. That's why people don't even notice this blessed band is over here doing their thing. For example, you can be at work and you're doing an excellent job at work, but because the colleagues don't like you, the employer will elevate someone else, promote someone else to another position. So that all the attention goes to that other employee. So nobody notices how the good work you're doing. So when I look at how society treated Robert Johnson's remembrance, at first glance it appears as if they hoped he would be forgotten. But because he couldn't be forgotten, now they had to recognize him. And this happened around the 1980s. Mind you, he died in 1938. In the 1980s, which over a half century later, it's then that the full recognition of Robert Johnson became public. Well, they came to recognize his impact. So, for almost a half century, folks hoped he would just be gone. What the impact he had. But of course, you can't change history. Now, Robert Johnson was a pagan, okay? And because he was pagan, other pagan musicians paid tribute to him. That's one of the reasons why they couldn't erase his memory of that he lived. They couldn't make the public forget about him. Now, even on YouTube now, Robert Johnson became trending. People are questioning about how he may have died or whether he truly sold his soul to the devil or not. Now, I want you to realize this. If Robert Johnson was a pagan, was of the world, if the world even tried to get rid of him because he was a conflicting individual, he was an individual that triggered conflict, how many more people didn't live that we don't that had an impact we're not aware of? And I'm talking about believers. How many true believers did not have an impact on how history went, but we never even heard of them? Because in history books, you only talk about Napoleon, George Washington, or Winston Churchill, or Adolf Hitler, or they talk about Stalin. Those are the main names you hear and they talk about. For example, during the German Empire, that is heading towards the First World War, there were many in the German Empire, including some high-ranking military officials who were against the First World War, who said, we don't support this. But you never hear the names of those high-ranking officials who openly spoke out that this is wrong. They always tell you that, oh, there was this crown prince of Austria-Hungary was killed by this somewhere in the Balkan. That triggered the First World War. But what they don't tell you is that despite that the German Empire was winning the First World War, they couldn't maintain the victory because a lot of people were against the war. So much that eventually the kings in the German Empire, including the German emperor, decided to forfeit their thrones and to leave. And then they pretended as if there was a revolution to happen. No, there was no revolution. The kings, the royals, just left because the conflict became too big. Then you had the Weimar Republic that led to a decline in the public morale of the public, of the German population. And then you had this guy, Adolf from Austria, who was boosted and empowered by the rich, and he promised to restore the German Empire in a new form. And he even promised to restore Western imperialism indirectly. I mean, there were many Americans back then that supported Hitler. Hitler didn't only have supporters in within the limits of the Deutsche Reich or the Weimar Republic. He had supporters all over Europe and also from North America. But as we know, history, that project, Nazi Germany, it went down the tube with millions of civilian deaths as a result. So, what I'm pointing out here is that when people give you history of your country or of an area, they will highlight things they want you to know. They will highlight things that will make them look good. They will not highlight the facts that will make you doubt the current situation. That's why, for example, when you are in, let's say, Colombia, they talk about history, but they don't honor Simon Bolivar that much. When you go to Venezuela, man, Venezuela today is called the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I'm not sure if they changed the name recently. I think not. But Venezuela, man, they kind of worship this man that they call Simon Bolivar. The problem is when you do historical research into this figure, Simon Bolivar, you figure that, first of all, nobody knows how he really looked like. You realize that the facts of his life are contradicting. You realize that this guy popped out of nowhere and suddenly became this liberator of South America. Oh, and after him, South America became worse. So you realize that it's even questionable what of this Simon Bolivar they tell you was even true. Now, in Venezuela, they use this historical figure Bolivar to justify the current Republic of Venezuela that's in place. In Colombia, they can't use Bolivar that much because the first country called Colombia collapsed. And Colombia, in its history, kept collapsing after independence. So to use this figure, Bolivar, as a liberating figure is not going to look well. So if you take history books from Venezuela and check how they talk about Bolivar, and take history books from Colombia, it's going to be quite different. Of course, it's going to mention similar facts, but the attitudes are going to be different. As simple as that. So that is why when you encounter a living individual whose name or whose existence even triggers conflict in people, know well that there is danger under this individual. Now you can pray for this individual and all of that, but when it comes to fellowship, beware. If they're not believers, you can't even fellowship with them. But even if they're believers, if they trigger conflict, even their name or existence, then you know they're in danger. Simple as that. And by the way, if you are an individual that, well, I'm saying this, if you are considered a conflicting individual, many jobs will not even hire you. That's why they do a background check on you to find out whether or not you have people coming after you. Because imagine, you have your own coffee shop. Now, with coffee shop, I'm actually in a coffee shop. In the Netherlands, a coffee shop is where you go and get your weed. Yes, you can get your weed legally in the Netherlands at a coffee shop. I'm not talking about that. When you have an actual coffee shop like Starbucks that produces coffee. Let's say you have a coffee shop and you're looking for a cashier. And there is this teenager, 7 years old, that you're allowed to work for you. But let's say this teenager comes from a family of drug dealers, and her family has a lot of anger against them. You putting her there as a cashier will get negative attention to your coffee shop. And before you know it, you have people throwing rocks at your coffee shop, or you will have people from the criminal world hang around your coffee shop. It's going to bring consequences. So likely, when you do your background check and find out who she is, you will likely not give her the job. And I can't blame you. As simple as that. Look, about Robert Johnson, that's history. He died. You can examine his life, and you can see where he went wrong, and you can see that his own people were against him. And you can also see that he was not smart by not relying on Christ. Absolutely not. The thing is, Dion asks, what is the purpose of Satan killing his own if he's still using them to feed on the negativity? The thing is, in this case, I won't even say it was Satan that killed them off, or the demons. His own people did, with their negative attitudes. So there was already negativity for demons to feed off. And by the way, if there's too much contention against one individual, it can lead to societal collapse. In such a case, even the demons will want the individual dead to prevent a societal collapse. Because once societal collapse happens, people are forced to look to the Heavenly Father. So demons do want negative contention to be around, but demons do not want the negative contention to explode. Because once the negative contention explodes, then people will be forced to look at the Heavenly Father, and then demons lose their grip on the population. So when an individual is a subject of controversy, there are times even demons turn on the individual because the individual being alive might cause demons to lose out. So sometimes demons even turn against their own pagan worshippers because those pagan worshippers may indirectly cause harm to the demonic agenda. That's how simple it is. Yes, psychic violence. Of course, there was psychic violence involved in this Robert Johnson case. Absolutely. There was even one individual who researched Robert Johnson, but he died without publishing what he found. If you research someone for years, at least when you know you're about to die, you make sure your data is available. So there are things about Robert Johnson that some people didn't want to come out. Look, there's one warning I want to give you in this live stream before I close it down. And that warning is pay attention to the subtle cues, subtle signals that world things give you. Okay, you see this in the movies, okay? Let's say you have a movie and you have this detective who has to research a homicide. Or let's say you have a cold case, that's better. You have a cold case, someone disappeared 2 decades ago. And now you have a cold case detective, need to investigate it. And the cold case detective speaks to one of the childhood friends of the missing individual. Then the childhood friend tells the detective in the movie that it's better to let this rest. Now, it's just a movie, you say. But remember, movies are not made to entertain you or to give you a good time. Movies are made to influence you. And let me tell you one thing. A lot of those movies out there are indirectly made for believers. Because you have a lot of pagans who are supportive of believers, but they can't openly support believers. So they make movies and other productions and they use biblical themes in order to get attention of believers. And sometimes the Heavenly Father will allow those pagans to minister unto us. So take this warning well. When people hint to you it's better to leave a case alone, they're actually warning you that if you get involved with researching something, you may get retaliation after you. Again, I told you before, cold cases are just cases the public doesn't want to have solved because it will reveal too much embarrassing facts about the community. And even the police doesn't want to deal with the case. That's why they become cold cases. For example, in the Netherlands, there are many people that have gone missing. And the only reason we don't know what happened to them is because the public doesn't want us to know. So even the police is cautious with with uh, publishing what they found out about those cases. So when you are looking into something, don't be too obvious about it that you're looking into something unless it's necessary. Because if you are into something in an obvious way, you may not notice the warning signals. Now, you take heed to the warning signals. It doesn't mean you cave in, you become afraid, but you're just alert. For example, that thing about the Wodan worship that I've warned you about those Germanic people, about people from Germanic ancestry that worship Wodan. There were journalists that researched those that Wodan cults, and some of them fled the country, or some of them died and the research went missing, or some of them had police officers telling them to hand in their research. So other people think, you know what, I don't even want to hear about this vote on cult, because if I talk about that, oh dear, my life will be in danger, whatever. Well, I'm able to talk about it because I have the resurrection power of Christ. Just understand, not everyone is qualified to research everything. Of course, if it's a medical research, you need to have a medical background to do the research into it when it comes to the molecules, all of that. Okay, that's obvious. Or if it's something relating to forensic data, you need to have a forensic background. So I'm not talking about the technical stuff. I'm talking about spiritually. If you don't have any uh, cover, then it's better for you not to look into certain things or not even to mention certain things. Why? Because once the retaliation comes, you have no safety that can keep you safe. A believer, anointed by the Father, can research almost anything and find out the truth about the matter. Because we have the resurrection power that will keep us safe and it will protect us. But while doing that, don't think it's strange when people begin to avoid you, because those other people may not have protection. Don't blame them, let them go. It may be the best for them to walk away from you because they don't have any protection. And they may become collateral damage when you're under attack. Look, I cannot say more about the life of Robert Johnson. It was short, unfortunately, but just know one thing: it didn't have to end this way for Robert Johnson. Now, we can't do anything about Robert Johnson, we can't do anything about him. But what we can do is learn from this history so that we know how to do better today. So do that. Do not cast pearls before swine like Robert Johnson did. It will always backfire on you and haunt you. Joe asks, how do pagans who know this stuff stay sane enough to function? Well, that's why a lot of pagans prefer to be around other pagans. You can have a guy, you can have a guy who's into a Celtic religion, he's from Ireland, and he will connect better with a Zulu chieftain who does black magic than he does with his own white Irish people. Why? Because that Irish guy who's into this Celtic religion, he feels at home around other pagans, no matter where the pagans are from, because he knows that his own common people in Ireland are unstable. That is why do not cast pearls before swine. And there are more people, not just in the African American community, there are more people worldwide who cast pearls before swine. Now, they did not mean harm. I'm sure, well, I assume that I'm certain that Robert Johnson did not intend any harm when he was proving himself. He was just showing, hey guys, I improved. What he didn't realize is that what he did would actually backfire on him. Sometimes you cast pearls for swine unaware, and it backfires on you. Sometimes you endanger yourself without knowing it. And that's why we need to learn to slow down, pray and fast, and reflect on the situation. We need to check the context. And we are believers. We walk in the resurrection power of Christ. We have the Holy Spirit inside of us. So we have to listen to the Holy Spirit. If you have good news and you want to tell your mom or dad, because you're on close terms with them, it can be the Holy Spirit tells you stop. It can be that you freeze and God tells you don't tell your mom and dad. Now you're kind of arguing with the Holy Spirit thinking, Lord, my parents were always there for me. Even when I was younger and I was a mess, my parents would have still took me back at home. I have to show my parents some honor. Okay? And if your parents are honorable and you want to honor them, good. But if God tells you don't, God's instructions are above honoring your parents. If you have honorable parents, That is logical. You want to share good news with them. You want to honor them. But if God tells you don't, you don't do it. Because even though your parents were honorable towards you, your parents may have deep-rooted dysfunction that makes them accessible to evil spirits as well as to uh, dangerous worldlings. So you may call your parents and tell them the good news that either you got the job or maybe you just found a new place. Your parents will be happy and they will share the good news with other people in the family or at work, whatever. And before you know it, your parents, without them being aware of it, they cause pearls before swine. They triggered reprobates and toxic people against you. And now you face difficulties in life. Are your parents evil? Are they negative? No. Are your parents honorable? Yes, they are. But they are deeply dysfunctional. And this deeply dysfunction in them is a risk for you. So there are times when Spirit tell you no. And when God tells you no, please stop arguing with the Holy Spirit. I mean, come on. He's God. Why would you argue with him? He has your best interest at heart. He has proven this. You don't argue with your employer at work because you're afraid to lose your job, right? But with God, there is no such thing as or else, or you're going to lose. No. So just trust God when he tells you don't do it. And that's another thing with a lot of believers. Some believers get in trouble because they don't submit to the Heavenly Father's guidance. When God tells you don't do it, because God wants to keep you away from unnecessary trouble. Do not cast your pearls before swine. Never. The pearls here are good news and progress. Now, you can't hide good news and progress anyway. It will always come out. Of course, you want to share. That's human. It's human to want to share good news. All human beings should rejoice in good news. We should be embracing good news on a daily basis. Unfortunately, that's not the case now. A lot of folks are invested in negativity. They're invested in death and tragedy. So people invest in death and tragedy are not going to rejoice that you're exceeding in life. They will not. They'll praise you after you die, saying you were such a great guy and say all types of good stuff, but when you are alive, they won't lift any finger to assist you. Yes, that's fallen mankind. Don't take it personal. It's just how those people are. And realize because of that, you cannot rely on them and you cannot embrace them. You walk in love towards them, but you don't walk in love with them. Do you understand the difference? Walking in love towards people and walking in love with. You can't walk in love with everyone. That is not possible. Christ doesn't even tell you to do that. We're told to, as far as it depends on us, to be at peace with all men. That implies that certain people you can't be at peace with because they're not invested in peace. They invest in debt and tragedy. Now, if they are invested in debt and tragedy, let them have debt and tragedy. That's not on you. Shake those off your feet and continue. You can ask your questions now in the live chat. But before I go to questions, do you understand what I just explained to you? Let me know in the live chat. The reason I decided to make this live stream because a lot of people talk about Robert Johnson, about his musical career. They talk about how he became the grandfather of rock and roll. They talk about the mystery about whether he sold his soul or not. But few people look at the context of his life and what surrounded it. And that's what I just did. Do not make the mistake Robert Johnson made. Okay? And there are a lot of people doing that today, including believers. Don't do it. All right. If I don't, just like Suzanne said, the blood of Christ is the only cover you really have. Because pagan covers, they will expire. And listen, one thing before I close the live stream, one thing I'm warning you, one instruction I'm giving you also. There's not something from the Bible or whatever, there's some instruction I'm giving you for practical reasons. When you see people casting pearls before swine, sharing good news and progress to those who don't deserve it, pray for that individual, but keep your safe distance from them. Because remember, when the crowd cannot get to that individual, but they see you around the individual, you're coming next. You're becoming next. That's what goes on. Okay, if you find out that you are a conflicting individual, it's quite simple what you do. You admit that you have retaliation against you. You admit that you have pathetic human beings that don't want to grow in life. So you realize it's not your fault that they decided to use you as a dump site. What it is on you to be smart from that point on and to withdraw yourself from their presence. That's what you do. You withdraw yourself from their presence. You move away, physically away from them, and then you go into therapy if necessary, just to process things about you. Let me tell you why I tell you to go into therapy. Okay, you don't have where you go into therapy. That's on you and definitely father. But the reason I'm telling you to go into therapy is because of the following. Often we cause pearls before swine because of unmet childhood needs or because of unprocessed psychological issues. Psychological issues. Again, causing pearls for swine is something we often do without realizing it. We think people will be happy for us when we finally succeed in life. That's what we expect. But we don't realize that a lot of people are not, because a lot of people don't even look for solutions. Or you may feel like you have to prove yourself to other people because you feel like you need to defend your good name, whatever. Maybe your parents taught you to never take disrespect and to draw boundaries, all that. Your parents taught you self-defense, and now you operate out of self-defense. But hold on, what your parents taught you is dysfunctional, because in this world, when you operate in self-defense, it will be used against you. Instead of self-defense, just detect the best situation and leave it. Even martial artists tell you the best fight is no fight. The best fight is fight you've prevented. You get me? Because once you're in a fight, there are no winners. Some lose less, but all are losers. So maybe you have this attitude of self-defense, and that's why I think I need to prove myself. I need to put people in their place. No, 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 no. The fact those people are not looking for solutions nor improvement shows you that they are the pathetic losers. They're the ones that insist on losing. So how are you going to prove your? Why are you proving you're winning to people who are only interested in losing? If they're only interested in losing, let them stay with their losses. Shake them off of you. They're not relevant. Sometimes we give relevancy to people who are not even that relevant, objectively. Why? Because we were traumatized and we don't see things properly. When you are traumatized, you don't see things properly. And when you don't see things properly, you tend to act in dysfunctional ways. And some dysfunctional acts will get you killed. When you're traumatized, you don't see things properly and you don't process things properly. So when you're traumatized, you tend to make dysfunctional decisions. And some dysfunctional decisions will be fatal. You can't rectify them because you're dead. Most of them you can rectify because you survive. So again, if you notice you are a conflicting individual, move away from the people physically, so they're not close to you. Go into prayer and fasting and go into therapy and heal. And once you heal, look for other people to connect to. Never venture back to where you came from. If later in life, after being delivered and breaking through, God allows you to visit your hometown, then you can do it. But if God does not allow you to visit your hometown, don't visit it. Look, that those other people are invested in debt and tragedy, that invest in debt and misfortune, that's not on you. There's nothing you can do about that. What you can, something you can do something about is you not being harmed nor ruined by their clinging to death and destruction. When people cling on to death and destruction, there's nothing you can do about that to change them. But what you can do is prevent their death and destruction that they cling on to from ruining you. So if you feel attracted, as if you have to be around people who are not good for you, admit that you have an issue and look for help for it. You can't fix the issue by yourself. At least you can look for help for it, to go to therapy or to go to deliverance. If you live with them in the same house, you avoid them as much as possible. and you become so motivated to leave that house. If you can afford a one-room flat somewhere for a cheap price, just take it. I prefer you to live in a one-room flat somewhere for a cheap price than for you to be in a palace together with people who are invested in debt and misfortune. If they're family, I don't care if they're family, especially when they're family, you need to watch out for them. Remember, Jesus said offenses will come. Parents will betray their children unto death. Children will betray their parents. Those things will happen. Indeed, this world is a cycle of trauma bonds. This is what the world is. So stop being focused on the perpetrators. Stop being focused on the gang stalkers. Stop being focused on the demons. Stop being so focused on Satan. Focus on you becoming better, because that's what matters. Reprobates are reprobates. What can you do about them being reprobates? Nothing. Focus on what you can do something about you. And once you focus on you and you become better, now you can deal better with bad situations. Don't be distracted by the bad situation. Focus on you getting better. The situation may not become better, but you have to become better. All right. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for being here. Keep on agreeing with Christ, and I'll see you next time. Be at peace.